At some point, smart men stop explaining themselves. They stop justifying. They stop over-clarifying. They stop chasing approval with words. And the strange part? The moment they stop, people respect them more. Women find them more attractive. Rooms take them more seriously. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why that happens and how to make that shift yourself. Here's something almost nobody tells you growing up. You're taught that being a good communicator means explaining yourself clearly, justifying your choices, making sure everyone understands your reasoning. And to a point, that's true. Communication matters. But there's a hidden trap inside that advice. Somewhere along the way, explaining clearly turns into explaining constantly. And communicating well turns into justifying everything to everyone all the time. That shift is subtle. Most men never notice it happening, but other people notice. They notice it in how you talk, in how quickly you backpedal after a decision, in how much energy you spend making sure nobody's upset with you. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The more you explain yourself, the less powerful your words become. Stick around because Block 5 explains the psychological reason over-explaining actually lowers your value in other people's eyes, even when your reasoning is completely correct. And near the end, I'll show you the exact line between healthy confidence and looking cold or arrogant, because that line is where most men mess this up. By the end of this video, you'll understand why smart, high-value men stop over-explaining themselves, and how that single shift changes how people perceive them, respect them, and are attracted to them. Not through arrogance, not through coldness, through something much simpler and much harder to fake. Let's get into it. Let's start with the belief that causes all of this. Most people grow up believing that explaining yourself is a sign of respect. You owe people your reasoning. You owe them context. You owe them justification. And in some situations, sure, that's fair. A promise broken deserves an explanation. A mistake that hurt someone deserves context. But here's where it goes wrong. Somewhere along the way, this idea gets applied to everything. Your career choices, your schedule, your opinions, your your simple preferences. Suddenly, you're not explaining because it's necessary. You're explaining because you're afraid of what happens if you don't. That fear is the real driver, not respect, not good communication, fear of disapproval. And that's exactly what smart men eventually learn to recognize and unlearn. Let's go a layer deeper because this matters. Over-explaining isn't really a communication habit, it's a psychological pattern. Specifically, it's usually rooted in a need for external validation. When a man over-explains, what he's often unconsciously saying is, "Please don't be upset with me. Please still approve of me. Let me give you enough reasons that you have no choice but to agree." That's not communication. That's a request for reassurance dressed up as explanation. Here's an easy way to spot it in yourself. Ask this question. After I explain myself, am I doing it because the other person genuinely needs the information, or because I need them to feel okay about it? If it's the second one, that's not clarity. That's anxiety wearing the mask of clarity. And people can feel that difference even if they can't name it. It shows up as a subtle drop in respect, a slight shift in how they see you, from someone who made a decision to someone still waiting for permission. Now let's clear up a big misunderstanding before we go further. Stops explaining himself does not mean becoming silent, secretive, or cold. It doesn't mean refusing to communicate or shutting people out. That's not confidence, that's avoidance wearing a different costume. What it actually means is this. A man reaches a point where his decisions don't require a defense. He can share his reasoning if it's useful, but he's not doing it to earn approval anymore. He's doing it, if at all, simply to inform. There's a specific shift in language that happens here. Instead of, "I'm sorry, I just felt like I needed some space this weekend. I hope that's okay. I just had a lot going on," and it becomes simply, "I needed some time to myself this weekend." Same information, completely different energy. The first version is asking for permission. The second version is stating a fact. And people respond to those two very differently, even if the actual reason is identical. Let's make this practical with a few examples, because the difference is easy to hear once you know what to listen for. Example 1. Declining plans. Over-explaining sounds like, "Hey, so sorry, I can't make it tonight. I've just had such a crazy week, work's been insane, and I really need to catch up on sleep. I hope you're not upset. We'll definitely do it soon, I promise." The confident version. "Can't make it tonight. Let's grab that later this week instead." Example 2. A career decision. Over-explaining sounds like, "I know it's a bit of a risk, but I've thought about it a lot, and I really think it makes sense. I know it might not seem like the safest choice, but..." The confident version. "I'm making the switch. Feels right." Example 3. Setting a boundary. Over-explaining sounds like, "I just don't really love it when plans change last minute. It's not a big deal. I just get a little thrown off. Sorry if that sounds weird." The confident version. "I'd rather we lock plans in early. Works better for me." Notice something in every example. The information barely changes. The energy changes completely. One version begs for approval. The other simply states reality. Quick pause here because this next part is where things get interesting. If you've caught yourself in any of those over-explaining examples, hit subscribe now. Because up next, we're getting into the actual psychological reason this shift makes a man more attractive. Not just more respected, but genuinely more magnetic. And there's a very fine line between confidence and coming across as cold, which we'll break down right after that. All right, let's keep going. Here's the part most people never explain properly. When a man over-explains, it sends an unconscious signal. This decision needs outside approval to feel valid. And whether people realize it or not, that signal reads as lower status. Not because explaining is inherently weak, but because the anxious energy behind it is. Attraction, at a psychological level, is closely tied to perceived stability. A person who seems steady in his own decisions, without needing a chorus of agreement, feels safer to be around, less unpredictable, less needy for reassurance. When a man stops over-explaining, he's essentially communicating something powerful without saying it directly. "I trust my own judgment enough that I don't need you to validate it for me to feel okay." That single unspoken message does more for attraction than almost anything he could actually say out loud. Here's a simple way to picture it. Words that come from anxiety pull respect away from you. Words that come from calm certainty pull respect toward you. Same mouth, same voice, completely different psychological effect on the person listening. Now here's the part where a lot of men take this too far, and it backfires badly. Some men hear "stop over-explaining" and think it means becoming distant, vague, dismissive, answering everything with one word and calling it confidence. That's not confidence. That's just poor communication disguised as strength, and people, especially women, can tell the difference almost instantly. The real line looks like this. Confidence sounds calm, clear, and complete, even if it's brief. Coldness sounds short, evasive, and leaves people guessing on purpose. Example of confidence. "I'm not really up for going out tonight. Let's do something low-key instead." Clear, complete, respectful. No anxious over-justifying required. Example of coldness. "Nah." No context, no warmth. Leaves the other person feeling dismissed rather than informed. The goal was never to say less information. The goal was to remove the anxiety underneath the words. You can absolutely be warm and brief at the same time. In fact, that combination, warmth without desperation, is exactly what makes this trait so magnetic. Before we get into how to actually build this in real life, here's something worth sitting with. There's a specific type of relationship dynamic this creates, one that most men don't realize they're missing out on until they experience it. It shows up in how women respond to this shift specifically, and it's coming up in just a minute. Let's get direct about this, since it's the core of the video. Women are highly attuned to certainty. Not arrogance, certainty. The difference between a man who's sure of himself and a man who's performing being sure of himself is obvious within seconds, even if it's hard to explain logically. When a man stops over-explaining, several things shift in how a woman experiences him. First, tension replaces predictability. A man who over-explains becomes fully readable, fully available, fully figured out almost instantly. There's no mystery left to hold attention. A man who states things simply, without justifying, keeps a small amount of intrigue in the interaction, not through games, just through natural restraint. Second, respect increases. Over-explaining, even unintentionally, can start to feel like seeking permission. And it's very hard to feel deep, romantic respect for someone who seems to need your approval on every small thing. Third, and maybe most importantly, safety increases. This sounds like the opposite of what you'd expect, but it's true. A man secure enough not to justify every choice reads as emotionally stable. And emotional stability is one of the most attractive qualities there is because it signals this person can handle life without falling apart or needing constant reassurance. Put those three together, tension, respect, and safety, and you get exactly the kind of pull that makes a man memorable, not just likable. Important balance here because this isn't about never explaining anything ever again. There are absolutely moments that deserve real explanation. If you hurt someone, if a decision directly affects someone else's life, if context genuinely helps someone understand you better, and it's coming from care rather than fear. The shift isn't never explain. The shift is stop explaining from anxiety and only explain from choice. A simple filter to use. Before explaining yourself, ask, am I offering this because it's useful to them or because I'm scared of how they'll feel about me otherwise? If it's useful to them, share it. Freely, warmly, without over-justifying it into a 10-sentence apology. If it's coming from fear, that's exactly the moment to practice saying less. Not coldly, just simply. Let the decision stand on its own. Here's the real transformation happening underneath the surface, because it's bigger than just communication style. Stopping over-explaining isn't really about words at all. It's about where a man gets his sense of okayness from. Men who over-explain are usually, even unconsciously, outsourcing their self-worth. Every explanation is a small request. Tell me this was okay. Tell me I'm still good in your eyes. Men who stop over-explaining have done something different internally. They've moved that validation inward. They've decided their choices are valid because they made them thoughtfully, not because everyone around them approved first. That internal shift is the real reason this trait is so attractive. It's not a trick. It's not a technique you perform on a date. It's the natural outward sign of a man who no longer needs permission to be himself. And that quality, quiet self-trust, is something almost impossible to fake and almost impossible not to notice. Let's bring this together. Smart men stop over-explaining themselves, not because they stop communicating, but because they stop communicating from fear. They learn the difference between sharing information and begging for approval. They keep warmth, but drop the anxious justification underneath it. And in doing that, something interesting happens. People respect them more. Women find them more magnetic. Rooms take their decisions more seriously, not because they said less, but because what they said finally came from certainty instead of fear. That's the real shift, not silence, not coldness. Self-trust, spoken simply. If this video gave you something to think about or something to work on, do two things right now. Subscribe so you catch the next one, because we're going even deeper into male psychology and attraction next time. And drop a comment. Where in your own life do you catch yourself over-explaining the most? I'll see you in the next one.